Hello and welcome back to another video. I hadn't planned on making this video, but I was sitting here grading some papers, reading some news articles, and thinking I haven't done a video on COVID-19 or coronavirus vocabulary. And that might be kind of helpful if you are trying to read newspapers in English, and a lot of the stories right now unfortunately are about COVID-19. Maybe I could do like a quick video, give you, right now I have 11 terms that you might see in a newspaper, and just give you a little understanding. So when you come to these words, it might not trip you up so much, or it might not slow you down while you're reading. So the first one is not so much with the medical field or medicine, but this is what a lot of people say when they are at home. And here in my state, it marks 1 month tomorrow. We've been in our house. And you might hear someone say, it feels like Groundhog's Day. It feels like Groundhog's Day. And that comes from a movie starring a guy named Bill Murray, where he lives this fantasy life. It's not real, but he lives the same day over and over again. For a really long time, he wakes up and experiences the same exact thing. If you've never seen Groundhog Day, it's a pretty good movie. But a lot of people, since they're at home, every day is like the last day they experienced. Every day is the same. So you might hear that some of your American friends say, it's like Groundhog's Day. And the next one is actually an acronym. And I've mentioned acronyms a couple times, but it's when the term is made up of letters and each of those letters stand for a word, like USA, United States of America. Number 2 is PPE. PPE, and that stands for Personal Protective Equipment. It's what doctors, nurses, healthcare workers need to protect themselves if they are going to work with COVID-19 patients. And there might be a couple new terms here, so I'll go slowly. But masks, and there's one mask in particular that's very important, and you might hear of a N95 respirator. I'll put pictures of these up because it can be a little bit difficult. But N95 is the type of mask, the best mask that protects doctors and nurses. You might hear face shield. I'll put a picture of that right now. Face shield. You might hear gown. You might hear stockings. But PPE is anything that protects healthcare workers when they are working with COVID-19 patients. And right now, all around the world, it is very difficult to get a lot of this material. The next one is a cloth mask. And I'll put up a picture of me wearing a cloth mask. My brother-in-law made me a cloth mask. And the CDC, there's another acronym, but it's the Center for Disease Control. And they are in Atlanta, Georgia. They are the group that gives the president advice on how to protect Americans from diseases. They are saying that Americans should wear cloth masks now when they go out grocery shopping or to the supermarket, because they think that it might actually help people from getting the coronavirus. But they are telling us not to wear PPE, not to wear the medical masks, because those are reserved for medical professionals. We just need a cloth mask to cover our face when we go out. And the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, is almost like the WHO in Geneva, which is what we call the World Health Organization. I'm sure it's different in other languages, but we call it the WHO, the World Health Organization, located in Geneva, Switzerland. And they are responsible for releasing statistics on diseases, keeping the world safe. Well, the United States has its own sort of WHO, and we call it the CDC. So, sorry, a lot of acronyms there, but makes it a little easier sometimes, not so much to say. The next one is definitely not very fun to talk about, but you might hear this term, mortality rate. Mortality rate. And it comes from the French mort in English, meaning death. So the mortality rate of a disease is the number of people who will die if they contract the disease. Contracting is a fancy way to say if they get the disease, if they contract the disease. So you just take the number of deaths and divide that by the number of reported cases. And it differs. It's different, quite a bit different in each country. And I took the top 4 countries with the most deaths and did my own math. So I'm not a math teacher. I don't think I messed this up, and I did the mortality rate for the top 4 countries with the most deaths. Now, the US's mortality rate is 4%. So if you get COVID-19 in the US, there's a 4% chance that you're going to die. The next one is Spain. Their mortality rate is 10%. So on average, if you get COVID-19, the coronavirus in Spain, you have a 90% chance of surviving. Unfortunately, Italy's is the highest at 13%, and France has 11%. Now, you got to be careful with those statistics because so many people who get COVID-19, it doesn't get reported. They have very mild symptoms. Symptoms are the experiences you have when you have the disease. So we know for COVID-19, it's coughing, difficulty breathing, fever. Those are what we call symptoms. If you have the common cold, you might just have a cough as your symptom. You may have some sneezing. You may have some itchy eyes. Those are symptoms. So even though those mortality rates seem pretty high in some countries, it could be because every case hasn't been reported. So with those mortality rates for the coronavirus, take them with a grain of salt. And remember, we went over a grain of salt in another video. It just means don't completely believe it. All right, the next vocabulary word is positive test. A positive test. Usually the word positive means something good. But when you're taking some sort of medical test, for instance, with COVID-19, if you take the test and it comes back positive, it means you have it. So it's not a good thing. Positive is not a good thing when we talk about COVID-19 tests. Next one, pretty big word, contagious. Contagious. That means how easy a disease is able to be spread. How easy does it go from one person to another? It's contagious. And as we know, COVID-19 is pretty contagious. Not as contagious as the measles, which is more contagious, but more contagious than the common flu. The next one you might hear in English is stay-at-home order or a shelter-in-place order, which most of the country is under. I think it's like 95% of Americans are now under a shelter-in-place order. And that means you have to stay at home. Like, don't leave the house. You can go out to get groceries. You can go out to get medicine. In most places in the US, you can go out to get exercise, but you shouldn't be hanging around with friends. You should be socially distancing, which is another term. We use feet in the United States, so it should be 6 feet apart from another person. And now if you go out, you should be wearing a cloth mask. So much of the country is under shelter in place. And in some states, it's a little bit more strict. For instance, California, the rules are a little bit harsher. They're a little bit worse. I'll put up this Twitter tweet that says some guys wanted to get a drink in California in a different city. And they went to the 7-Eleven, you can see behind that picture, and they were each fined $1,000 because they went to a different city that they weren't a resident of, that they did not live in. So they were fined $1,000. They violated the shelter-in-place order. In my state, if I wanted to, I could go to the next town and get a drink at the 7-Eleven if I wanted. But California has seen more cases than my state, so they're a little more strict. The rules are a little bit harder. They're a little bit harsher. The next one is essential worker. Essential worker. Essential means super important, necessary, essential worker. And a lot of times, the only people working in the United States right now are essential workers. Super important, still actually going to work. So some essential workers are bus drivers, custodians at hospitals. Somebody needs to clean it up. Doctors, grocery store workers. If your car breaks down, so we call them mechanics, those are essential workers. So any worker that is said to be something necessary for life to continue, mostly medical and food, but not only. For instance, my son, I did a video about them getting their bikes fixed. And since a bicycle is a mode of transportation, people who fix bicycles are considered essential workers. And the last one, it is ventilator. Ventilator. You probably have something in your language for this machine because it is super important right now, especially dealing with the coronavirus. And a ventilator is a breathing machine. You might hear that term sometimes too, but it is a machine that actually breathes for people. And as I'm sure you know, if somebody is really sick with COVID, they won't be able to breathe on their own. So they might need a ventilator. And I'm sure in your country, it is very difficult to get these ventilators. And there's a picture I'll show. It had a price at $17,000 for this ventilator. It might be a little bit cheaper ventilator, I don't know. But at one time, they were $20,000, $25,000. It's a lot of money. But now if you need a ventilator, they're at least $50,000 because they're so hard to get. The price has gone up. One of our car companies in the United States is called GM. And the president ordered GM to stop making cars and start making ventilators. That is one power that the president has, usually only used during war, but a lot of people say we actually are at war right now, war with this virus. And from what I've heard in Italy, Ferrari, that's how we say it in the United States, Ferrari is no longer making cars, but they also are making ventilators. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned a little something. If you did, think about subscribing to the channel, maybe leave a comment, thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.